Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Red Power Hour. I'm Melanie Yazzie, currently calling in from Minnesota, Mokoche. If you can see this beautiful sign behind me. Elena and Dee, I'll let you introduce yourselves and then we'll just get into the topic of today's conversation.
I'm Elena Ortiz. I'm calling in from Ogapoge Owinge, and I'm the co-host of Red Power Hour, and I'm excited to talk about this.
Hello, Yate. My name is Demetrius Johnson. People call me D. People also call me Navajo of the North. People also call me
They don't.
the Ganado guy. People also call me that guy, that boy. Ankle breaker, pie baker.
Stop.
Ma'i.
Yeah.
Shut up, D.
Anyways, Twitterchini initially. Adosit na Jini Bashichin. Sanjikin Edashachela Twitterchini Chinella. What's up, relatives?
Demetrius is also a member of the Red Nation,
Yeah.
which he did not mention.
I've been a member for like 11 years or something.
Since the organization started.
Yeah.
So just like a key takeaway.
Yeah, I'm not just some rando.
So thanks everyone again for joining us and listening to another episode of RPH. I know it's been, since before the end of 2025 that Elena and I have recorded. We intended to do this episode on that most venerated of Indigenous films, Smoke Signals. We'll do a review of Smoke Signals sometime down the line. But it just seemed important in this given moment in history, given what's happening here in Minnesota, Mokoche, here in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, with the invasion of ICE and the state terror that has been unleashed on this entire community, the entire metro area of 3.5 million people, that we just have a conversation about what's happening. I'm not even sure where to start because there's actually so much happening. But I think maybe a place that might be a good starting point. Elena, you are in Mordor, right? You are not in Minnesota. You're in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I'm not on social media anymore. So I'm like very uninformed in a lot of ways about what the hot takes are or like the kinds of narratives that are going viral or circulating. But I'd be really interested to hear what are like some of the prevalent themes that you are hearing or seeing, whether it's on social media or mainstream news, or just even in conversations with people about what is unfolding on the ground here in the Twin Cities.
Yeah, it's it's horrific from the murder of Renee Good. That kind of centered the media attention, and of course you had people posting videos from left, right, and in between. And, videos, unless they're AI generated, don't lie, but perspectives can be manipulated. So it's really hard to tell, which direction videos were taken from, or who was around at that given time. The only thing that's really clear through the videos that I've seen in social media is, that she was obviously murdered. And that's like a no-brainer with the fact that the first shot would have killed her and 2 more shots were fired after that. And then what the ICE murderer said.
Jonathan Ross, after that, what was his name?
What was his name?
Jonathan Ross.
Yeah. Don't want to say it. Just the ICE murderer. And then, of course, social media and the news and everything exploded. And it was all, about the number of ICE agents in Minneapolis, and the the protesters, and the protesters are getting beaten and tear gassed, which I have no doubt is true. But it's really hard to tell. And I did listen to the podcast from comrades Nick and Vin Dion on Friday, and what I didn't know from that was that it's all centered around the south side of Minneapolis. I can't tell you the last time I was in Minneapolis, but I know that part of town is where the American Indian movement was born and is indigenous centric, but a lot of immigrants and people of color live there, so that doesn't surprise me. That's something that's not talked about on social media. It's not mentioned by the news that most of the ICE agents are centered. I don't remember what the hotel was that they mentioned, but there's so many conflicting messages, and just, I'm not on social media an awful lot. I don't watch mainstream news. I see things on videos by Al Jazeera and Indian Collective. And it's not easy to pick and choose what is actually accurate and what is being manipulated. So I'd say my perspective, long story short, actually that was a long story, is that we're not getting the truth on the ground. We are getting chaos. We are getting, what people want us to see, not necessarily the truth. And I think what people want us to see, whether it be mainstream news or social media, is always dependent on their own personal perspectives and bias. And I'm not seeing a lot of what I heard on the Red Nation podcast as communities coming together, as people of all races and colors and cultures supporting one another. We're not getting that here in Mordor. We're only getting it from Red Nation or Indian Collective or even AJ.
Yeah, I think it's like been like ever since the murder of Renee Good that I've been like on social media, but like I'm also here. But it's like so interesting, like being out in the community, going out into the city and seeing like what it's like, hearing people's stories, and then coming back like at night and I'm just like scrolling on social media and then like seeing like what people are saying or like seeing what people are posting. And one of the things that's really just been, I don't know, very upsetting is just, people that aren't from here. People, I mean, I'm not from here, but, just seeing like, particularly like influencers, native influencers saying like, oh, I've gotten like permission from people from on the ground to post this. And it's just like the most sensationalist, like most like eye grabbing, videos or like posts saying like, it's chaos here, I'm scared, or like they're surrounding like this certain part of like town and we need help and, stuff like that. And, a lot of the times it's like, like very misinformed people, even here on the ground, right? Like even people here that don't necessarily have a standing in the community, or like they're just known for just like, just being a little bit extra. And you find out like what has actually happened isn't like, what is actually happening. Like people, there's still like police serving warrants for like things outside of ICE, just like everyday things. And some people like misconstrue that for, stuff that's happening with ICE. And so, it's just like very upsetting to see like there's just people on the outside causing chaos and like creating like this whole other narrative that isn't like what's happening here. And like what is happening here is like exactly what Elena just talked about, is like there's a lot of like community defense. Like there's a lot of people looking after each other, looking after their neighborhoods. And it's interesting, like coming from Albuquerque, where like neighborhoods or like places aren't necessarily like places of like defense or whatever, like no one ever calls like, you know, the west side of Albuquerque like, hey, like we're all defending the west side, you know, like it's like, because I think it's like so vast and like what are you talking about? There's like so many west sides of like Albuquerque, or like we're defending the east side of Albuquerque. It's like, okay, well there's a little, so calling, you know, I think that's like one thing that's like I'm taking in is like neighborhoods as like defense points are like actually neighborhoods. You know, there's like blocks, and like that's the Phillips neighborhood. That's like where like Somali people are. That's where Native people are. But I think why the South Side is also kind of like a, you know, a point of like, what do you call it? Like a point of conflict, or like
Inflection point.
yeah, where a lot of ICE agents are, is because like where ICE agents are at Fort Snelling, which is directly next to the airport, the MSP airport, and everything's just like located like, you know, geographically like south of Minneapolis. That's where MSP is. And so, you know, the headquarters for ICE, like that's kind of just like where they go out, and then all of a sudden they're, you know, in the neighborhood. But man, there's a lot of things I'm like thinking about. But I think I'll just pause there.
Yeah, so geographically, oh sorry.
No, I was just going to say the other thing that I was interested, curious about, Dee, and I don't know, you know, what you know about it, is the 4 indigenous people who were kidnapped by ICE, who have been in the media described as unsheltered, and they were detained, arrested, and one of them possibly has been released, but they're holding them hostage to try to force the tribe to sign an agreement with ICE.
That one, I can share like what I was told and like what I know, but this isn't like 100% fact, or you know, just it's just literally like what we just been told recently, is that a lot of the, you know, the people in the Phillips neighborhood, because it's like so, you know, everyone knows pretty much everyone, even like, you know, unsheltered people. And I guess people are saying like the people, they don't know all the names. They know the name of one person, but that one person isn't someone that anyone knows. Like they hear the name and they're like, we don't know anyone by like that name. We've never heard of anyone by that name. And so, you know, there's just kind of a speculation that these people actually might not even be native. Because ICE is also not giving up information about like who these people are either. And even though like you know, tribal the OST tribal leaders like don't, you know, they're here, they're asking questions. ICE is still not giving up that information. So it's not 100% confirmed if they are even like tribal members or who these people are actually.
And so I think this particular case is a really good example of the really chaotic, conflicting information. And so you'll hear different versions of something from different people. There's a lot of word of mouth, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Word of mouth, it's the word of mouth kind of communication networks are part of what are keeping people safe, because of what we're confronting today that we didn't actually have to confront even a decade ago was like the really sophisticated mass surveillance technology of the state. And so there's been a lot of, you know, there's a lot of awareness of that. I think what I've noticed on the ground here, and how communities are keeping themselves safe because of that reality that we now face as we're mobilizing. And so I don't even remember the source at this point. I also heard that in addition to what Dee just said, that they might not even be tribal members, that 3 of them have been released. And so I'm like, well, if 3 of them have been released, then somebody must know their names. What I do know for a fact is that there are several, maybe 4 or 5 council members from the Oglala Sioux tribe who are here, who have gone to the federal building at Fort Snelling to inquire about their tribal members after they were made aware that those tribal members have been detained. And so there is an official effort that the Oglala Sioux tribe is engaged in to find out who those members are, where they are in the system, and I'm sure, try to secure their release. And something else that has been happening that tribes have been doing is that tribes that have members who are here, I'm sure people know, or maybe you don't know, but that the urban Native population in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul, is one of the largest in the country. This was a relocation city in the 1950s and the 1960s. The Phillips neighborhood is kind of like the heart. It's like the beating heart of the urban Native community here. And that is where allegedly these Oglala Sioux tribal members were abducted from. They were abducted from an underpass that is, like maybe right across the street from the Little Earth community, which is actually like the beating heart of the urban Native community here in the Twin Cities. And so the tribes that have probably like high percentages of their tribal citizens who reside here, which is a lot. It's like a lot of Native people live in the Twin Cities metro area. They have started out of the Phillips neighborhood at the Indian Center issuing tribal IDs to their members who live here in the metro area, just to ensure, at the very least, this is like a first step, that Native people have the proof of their tribal citizenship on them at all times. And I'm sure that this is I'm not sure. I hope that this is being circulated on social media and people are aware that it's not just like Native organizers in the city who are doing incredible things actually to protect not just the Phillips neighborhood, but the Native population throughout the metro area. But tribes have now been activated. I don't know how many tribes have now been activated and are taking like that very initial proactive step just to be able to verify citizenship for their tribal members who might be at risk. And the reason why it may seem strange maybe for people listening, why like, oh, ICE is only going after, immigrants. And that is like patently false, given what we've seen on the ground here. Yes, right? Yes. But also ICE is going after activists. ICE is obviously going after American citizens. ICE is going after Native people. ICE is going after people who are engaged in legal observation. Renee Good was engaged in legal observation. People have not stopped doing that here since her murder, their murder, I'm not sure their pronouns, a week and a half ago. And so there is an entire infrastructure of just like people's legal observation, like self-organized legal observation that's happening block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. And there are many Native people who are engaged in legal observation in and around the Phillips neighborhood, which again is like the center of the Native community here. And I know I just kind of like segued into kind of another topic of conversation, but I just wanted to give people a sense of like what the landscape looks like. And I predict that there will be more interaction between tribes, Native organizations that have political power in the Twin Cities, and grassroots Native organizers as the situation continues to unfold. I can't predict whether or not this is going to be a protracted struggle on the ground. I was told, right, there are several hotels. So people have been staging noise demonstrations, also self-organized noise demonstrations at hotels across the metro area that people have been able to identify are putting ICE up for accommodation while they're here. Obviously, there's such a large influx of ICE agents. They're staying, at hotels all over the place. And so, people here are just trying to make it as uncomfortable and inhospitable as possible for them. The ICE has been doing a really amazing job watching them slip on the ice. Like Mother Earth is also like here. She's like with the people, like, because the ice situation here is like, meaning like water freezing is like, I haven't seen this this is my 5th winter, I think, in Minnesota, and I haven't seen ice this bad, and I don't think it's a coincidence. So it's actually making their operations tactically difficult as well and extremely uncomfortable. And so the Earth is aligning with the people here. to engage in these tactics. And the tactics are just to protect the community. People don't want ICE here. Like, nobody wants ICE here. And because we know that it just makes everything dangerous, like, it increases the threat. And, you know, this city has seen a large police presence before. I mean, we all know what happened, you know, in May of 2020 here. I'm not talking about the uprising, you know, I'm actually talking about the police murder. The American Indian movement was born in the Phillips neighborhood, was in 1968, and they had to start legal observation and community patrols because the police were so violent towards Native people. And so there is just a long history and a long memory and a legacy of people here protecting the community against these like foot soldiers of occupation. And so this is actually not anything new for people in the Twin Cities. Certainly it's not new for Native people. And so I know I just went on like a bit of a riff there, but I just wanted to give folks a sense of what's happening, and that there is a high degree of collaboration and solidarity, I would say, amongst different Native entities that are starting to work together, because everyone here knows that they have to work together in order to accomplish even one simple thing like track a relative who has been abducted and is now in the system. That takes an enormous amount of work across a lot of sectors of people, activists, tribal officials, et cetera, to be able to even just do that one thing. And I'm not even sure, I'm not on any of the rapid response chats. There are several, is my understanding at this point. And so I don't know quite the statistics, but there are people keeping track of the number of abductions that are happening. And I think probably starting a database, like a people's database. And so from that, trying to really track the names of people, where they're from, where they're being held, you know, possibly where they might be going, if they're actually moving them to other locations. And so even that work is just a tiny, tiny chunk, but requires an enormous amount of coordination and organizing to be able to accomplish. And so these are just what I've been talking now for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And what I just described is like 1% of what people are doing here right now.
It's really, it's heartening to hear and to see communities come together. And certainly Minneapolis, St. Paul has had their fair share of, you know, the murder of George Floyd and then the aftermath of that. And so Black neighborhoods coming together, and, you know, even like you said, 1968, the American Indian movement, you know, protecting the indigenous population, the urban populations. And I think that a lot of the rest of us could learn from the organization of the urban communities, because ICE is not just kidnapping people from urban centers. We had a Dene man who was kidnapped, I think it was yesterday. He had his driver's license, his birth certificate, his tribal ID, and they took him anyway. And the challenges in the more rural areas, particularly like, you know, the vastness of the Navajo Nation, is that somebody could disappear without even being seen, because, you know, there's not many, there's a lot of miles without a lot of population. So how can we all learn from what's being done in the urban areas? How can we learn to protect our communities? Because it's happening everywhere. And there are the pockets of concentration, like right now, Minneapolis, St. Paul, but it's happening everywhere. And we all need to know how we can protect, you know, our people.
Yeah, I think like I think that's like why I get upset about like the sensational stuff that's being posted on social media, because one, like, I guess what I'm like, the people that start burning stuff or like start looting the ICE vehicles that just get abandoned, and like all the videos about ICE throwing flashbangs or whatever. Like, yes, like those small pockets of like resistance or like anger or rage happen, but like 99.9% of like everyone else is like organizing. And I think that's like the most important point, is like everything that Dr. Mel just listed takes like a lot of people and like a lot of coordination. Um, and I think that's like everyone just has like kind of like the discipline to do that. We keep getting reminded that, I mean, we talked about South Minneapolis, but it's happening all over Minneapolis.
Yeah.
We have comrades in North Minneapolis that, they've been experiencing this. And we're also reminded like this has happened to the Hmong community here for like months, even before all of this happened. So there's already been kind of just like a buildup of where things are now. And so, people have organized like, providing people with like in-home healthcare for people that are just too scared or like too targeted to even go to the hospital, to even pick up groceries, to even like drop their kids off at school. And so there's a lot of just like already built in things. I mean, it takes a lot of coordination, takes a lot of communication, but literally just like doing like basic like tasks, daily tasks in order to protect people. And I think, one of my favorite things, I mean, it's very tragic, but it's a beautiful example of just like the community really coming together. Is like protecting the children. We've been told like, since the murder of Renee, and what children see like on news or on online, is the children are scared of ICE. Even children that aren't like necessarily targeted by ICE, like they're really scared, and like they want their parents to actually do patrols around the school. And a lot of parents have actually self-organized to just like walk around the school just so that the children can see them and that they feel protected. And so things like that, where these are just parents, these are just like people that sometimes aren't even like necessarily targeted or targets of ICE, like they're also like organizing in order to keep the peace, or like keep even just like children like peace of mind intact. And I think that's like what's really different about Minneapolis that I'm seeing, is like people have already experienced this, even if they aren't organizers. Like people are invested in protecting their communities and protecting like the little ones. And I don't think, I mean, I'm just making assumptions, but I don't think a lot of them are like, politicized in the way that, we are, or like a part of like an organization. They're just like, just working class people.
Yeah, to speak really quickly to something you said earlier about the Dene relative who was abducted by ICE, and thinking about like the Navajo Nation, or like the more rural areas, for example, in New Mexico back home, and people disappearing without being seen. There's an entire infrastructure now that people have organized, just everyday people have organized. And part of the observation, the infrastructure of legal observation, is yes, to observe legally, like what ICE's conduct as they're executing abductions and apprehensions. But again, it speaks back to this data collection piece. It's also seeing with your eyes when somebody is abducted and providing information. There's a certain set of information. Can you get that person's name? Like, do you know where they live, right? Those kinds of things, so that you can identify. And so part of the operation that people have just been organizing themselves, pretty much neighborhood by neighborhood, block by block here, is to make sure that they're just seeing what is happening. And I think that this is something that can be replicated in other places. you may not necessarily be able to prevent an abduction 100% of the time, but you are able to track, whether it's tracking the ICE vehicles themselves. So you can alert other neighborhoods like, oh, this vehicle is headed, east on I-94. It's headed from like the south side over to like the west suburbs, or for example, of Minneapolis. So there's been a lot of that. But I would imagine, I can't say this with certainty, but I think actually right now, the database of information, whether it's information about who is being abducted or information about the ICE agents who are engaged in the abductions, the most comprehensive information right now is probably the information that's being collected by people themselves. I'm not entirely sure the state or even the city has that information. And so it's very humbling to actually be witnessing this. I've only lived here for 3.5 years. I'm not even from here. I'm Danae. You guys know this. We're all from the same part of Turtle Island. And even I have just been really floored, I think, by, what's the word I'm trying to use? Just like, I think to use the word discipline. The discipline and the dedication of people here to doing this work. And it's being called rapid response in the various places or like communication networks that folks are using. But it is rapid response, but it's actually so much more. And things are unfolding so quickly every single day. There's all kinds of new things happening. And so it's been hard to kind of like take a step back and to have kind of like an analytical understanding of what's happening, because the tactical needs are so, just for care, like what Dee said, like just getting people groceries takes an enormous amount of coordination. And so what I've been witnessing, yes, is like an incredible discipline, incredible dedication by people at all levels, and kind of in all aspects of the work. It's like a wheel that has all of these spokes. And it's been really, I have some other thoughts. I was just kind of developing somewhat of a bit of a political analysis about this right before we started recording. I don't have to drop that just yet, so we can keep talking. But yeah, that's what I've been seeing. And we're very experienced organizers, and I was watching a live stream. So there was like one of the January 6th rioters who was pardoned. I forgot that dude's name. Who cares what his name is? But he tried to bring a bunch of basically fash to armed friendlies, to downtown Minneapolis today, just a few hours ago. And I was watching a live stream from the protest from where they were starting at City Hall in downtown Minneapolis. And the live streamer said, Minneapolis is in a league of its own in terms of community support and togetherness. And this person who was doing media was like, I've never seen anything like this. And there were six fash. I think there was like 6 people showed up, and yet there were like thousands of people who showed up. And it wasn't to get rowdy and intense. It was literally just to protect the community. And who would have thought that within a 5-year period, like this is somebody who like essentially tried to stage a coup. And this was, who was pardoned by Trump, right? This was in Trump's last administration. And even with their dude in the White House, they actually don't have as much power. I think that's what today demonstrated to me. They don't actually, I think, have as much power as maybe we think they do, or they think they do, or that the narrative is the narrative that is being spun. And so I feel like what I'm seeing on the ground here is like, we talk about this in the Red Deal. This is what real people power looks like in action, live, as like a movement is unfolding. And I am just like floored to even just be a tiny, floored and humbled to be just like a tiny little piece, in that. And I don't know if I've ever experienced this before. I think at this scale and at this magnitude. And I just want people to know that. I don't know. There's a lot of fear, right? There is fear. It's real. the violence is real, but I don't know. Also, like, I'm really proud. Sorry. I was going to get emotional. I mean, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I feel like what I'm seeing here is that like the movement has actually matured. And I didn't know, and I wasn't sure if we had. And the fact that there's like such a profound and powerful infrastructure of care that exists here that can be activated like that, right? Like we've learned over the last however many years and decades of struggle, and it's working. It's working. I mean, it's early days, but it's working, and it is real people power. And so like watching that happen, and these are like people from all walks of life participating. And I wasn't sure that we were there yet. I think we all have a lot of despair. Last year was a really hard year. And I just, the message of fear and terror is really strong. And there's a really good reason for that. But just from like a revolutionary's perspective, I'm like so proud to be in this community and to be amongst comrades of all walks of life, new comrades who've been in the struggle for 40 years. Yeah, we've learned things. We're implementing the things we've learned, and it's happening on a scale that I'm not sure I've ever witnessed before. And like that is something that is like powerful and should inspire all of us.
I'm just so glad to hear that, because that's not what we're getting outside of Minneapolis. And, you know, if I was reading the material conditions on the ground from social media or mainstream media, it's chaos, it's despair, it's ICE winning the battle because they have been given absolute power to murder people and get away with it. And so listening to you talking, Melanie, is like a whole different side of the coin. And that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that the revolution is maturing. I want to hear that people are caring for one another and for their communities. And, you know, yes, it takes a lot of organization to do that, but people willing to do it and people looking at the material conditions and seeing what needs to be done and actually getting out there and doing it is so amazing. And it's fabulous. And, you know, we heard from Nick Estes, Comrade Nick, on Friday from the Many Shields and what they're doing, and Vin Dion. I'd like to know what the revolutionary women are doing.
Well, from my observation, I mean, this is like talking about like the Phillips neighborhood, the Native neighborhood, and this is where we spent like, I think almost all our time on the ground. Is that, you know, they have a coffee shop, you know, it's like kind of like the central organizing hub there. But when you walk in, it's like all the women like holding down like that space. You know, they're organizing. I mean, they've been getting like a lot of donations, so like organizing things. You know, there's little babies around, and you know, like they're just doing, you know, just like literally like the holding down that space, like making sure like, you know, think like food and stuff is like ready to go, like in packs for like, cause like that patrol or like people that are volunteering, they come into that space, they just grab some snacks, they grab like water. So they make everything like organized and available. They're cleaning up the space. I mean, not like in a, you know, like a weird fucked up way, but literally just like, you know, making sure that everything is like neatly organized and available, and like this space is like a space for everyone that feels like safe and comfortable. I mean, yeah, there's like babies around, there's like elders around, they're just like, you know, conversing, they're like having coffee, they're just talking about things. I mean, was it today, one of the the aunties of like the neighborhood. You know, she comes in and she's like, everyone, if people start asking you about donations, tell them the one thing that we need is earplugs, because people are telling us like the National Guard are coming in with their sound cannons, so everyone just focus on earplugs for now. And so like, you know, the ladies are kind of like they're communicating, they're like giving us like the on the ground information, and they're also the ones like organizing, the what I'm seeing, like the role of the men mostly is like, they're on patrol, they're protecting the community, they're like, like they're going in their trucks and just like literally just like, protecting the neighborhood. And the women are like the kind of central like communication line. They're organizing like the donations, they're organizing like the care, and I don't know, like it's a very beautiful space. I don't know.
Trust me, there are plenty of women and queer relatives who are on patrols too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. They are fearless. I mean, they're fearless, but this is the other thing. No one's out here trying to like fight. Like that's just, people are just trying to protect. And this is the thing we've seen as a through line. I think a lot about Standing Rock as like such a punctuation point. Again, another inflection point in the movement, at least since I've been politicized since 2012. But the state is actively creating narratives and tactics to criminalize caretaking. That's literally, and now they can call caretaking terrorism, right? That's like the newest thing. And water protectors, like that term protectors, like we're protectors, not protesters, right? That came out of the front lines of Standing Rock. We're actually seeing the legacy of that. And then I think also the activation of these truly remarkable, widespread caretaking infrastructures that we all implemented to protect our people when the pandemic began 5 years ago. And so PPE, when there was all of these debates happening at the federal level, like I remember in movement spaces, people were engaged. I would say that the practices of social distancing and like protecting people were the strongest in those spaces. And during the uprising, the uprising of 2020, most of the work the Red Nation did that summer was simply to protect our people against the predation of the state, which also includes these like the armed friendlies, like the militias, like the element that tried to come here this afternoon and got rocked by the people. I mean, they just got scared away. They didn't get rocked. They just got scared away, basically, by the people here. And so it's not a surprise that we're a decade later than Standing Rock. We're 5 years out from the pandemic and the mobilization of 2020. And I feel like I'm seeing some sort of like consolidation of that caretaking infrastructure and how people are acting so powerfully on the ground here. And then you're seeing the ramping up by the state of the criminalization of that infrastructure. And it's just care. It's literally just caretaking. That's like all people are doing. And caretaking is like, you can caretake in a whole lot of different ways. And I feel like politically, it's the confluence of like indigenous values and knowledge systems about caretaking the land, being a good relative, right? Caretaking the people. It's the confluence of caretaking the water. It's the abolitionist politics that really, I think, became much more widespread because of, what transpired in 2020. And that also has caretaking, mutual aid, really at the center, right? What we were doing during the pandemic, actually Red Nation was doing that like from the very beginning. And then we realized there was this actual kind of like political strategy called mutual aid that comes out of the anarchist tradition specifically. But for us as Indigenous people, it was just about taking care of our relatives. And so I think that's what we're really seeing in this moment. And I don't know if anyone has mentioned it. And so of course we would expect the state, the settler state, the ruling class to do everything they possibly can to destroy that, to delegitimize it, to criminalize it, to vilify it, to physically destroy it, and to break it up. Because there is more power. There's more power in solidarity and care than there can ever be using guns and tanks, period. And that is what I'm seeing on the ground here. It's what I saw in Standing Rock. But like I'm saying, I feel like it's the coming together of a lot of things and the blossoming of this. It's dangerous because the state sees care as a threat. Like, what a bunch of losers. They see like people caring for each other. It's a threat to their profit motive. It's a threat to their power. The only thing the only legitimacy they have is, through state violence. And our legitimacy is just like showing up for each other.
Yep.
It's simple, actually. It doesn't even have to be ideological.
Yeah. We also heard from mostly women too, like how they do patrol or whatever. Like they're just like in their cars and just like following like suspicious vehicles or vehicles they don't recognize. And they've actually been like the ones that have been like, they call it tagged. They've been marked. And some of them have literally just been like pulled out of their vehicles.
Like violently.
Yeah, like broken windows, and they're just being like dragged out of their doors. They're out now, but I think it was the first night we were there. These were some of the stories. Like they just really walked into the coffee shop and they're just just telling the story of like what just happened. So yeah, they're out there doing it all, really. Caretaking. That's all they're doing is just caretaking, making sure their relatives are safe, and
yep,
they're getting brutalized for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people realize that the traditions of the American Indian movement and the Black Panthers were originally caretaking and defense. And, the Black Panthers started out serving breakfast to kids on their way to school and patrolling the neighborhoods like you're talking about, because the cops were so vicious and violent and brutal. And American Indian movement was the same thing. That, you get the Hollywood version of AIM, but really AIM started as defense and to protect and caretaking. That's literally what the word is caretaking. And so it sounds like, this has been incredibly successful in Minneapolis. And of course, because it's been successful, excuse me, it has to be criminalized. It has to be, renamed as terrorism, so that the ruling class and that the administration can justify the violence against Native people, but all people. I mean, it's all people. Renee Good was not a Native person and was murdered. And you're hearing, whether it's true or not, people getting shot, the violence is all being perpetrated by the fash who are mostly white. And now it's white on white. It's white on everything. It's not just them brutalizing Black neighborhoods or Black people or Native people in Native neighborhoods. Now, it's so widespread that it's hard to read, other than they're just going after anyone who happens to be in their way.
Mm-hmm.
That's accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're going after anyone who happens to be in their way. They're going after anyone who is asserting their constitutional rights. Listen, I'm not I don't typically appeal to the Constitution, for anything, but yeah, I mean, it's a free for all. In their minds, it's a free for all. But what they're confronting here is, I'm more interested in what the people are doing, actually, I guess. And I feel like we've done a good job describing what the people are doing. I've spent a lot of time studying the fash mentality, over the past decade, because it's become a more prevalent element that we have to be very sharp about in our minds, given how dangerous that element is. But it's also important that we study our own mentality, and our own traditions. And certainly there is a memory, or an intergenerational memory of violence in this city, this metro area. But there's also an intergenerational memory and a practice of liberation. And this is teaching me, being here is teaching me that liberation looks like care. I already knew that politically and kind of analytically and historically, but seeing it now is really, I don't even know how to articulate it, because it's formulating in my mind and in my spirit. And that is something different than, I feel even what I used to mean when I would use or invoke the term liberation. And so, yeah, intergenerational trauma is powerful, but arguably intergenerational liberation is more powerful. And that's the basis of what I see happening here. And just to remind ourselves that we have power. And that's not just me giving some sort of inspirational speech to the masses. I'm fucking seeing it. I'm saying we have power because people here are actually exerting that power. And the way they're asserting and building that power is through care. That's the primary vehicle, care and solidarity. And yeah, it's a lesson even to me.
That's wonderful. I mean, it's that makes my day. That makes my year, even though it hasn't been a very long year. That makes my year. I'm so glad to hear that, because it's important to those of us who are not out there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, to know what's going on the ground, and to be able to hold on to that hope. And, we all come from communities where we have both that intergenerational trauma, but also the intergenerational hope and the knowledge that our ancestors sacrificed everything so that we could be here. And it's beautiful to hear that hope is being put into practice, and it's creating, these conditions on the ground where people are joining in to the caretaking and seeing what needs to be done. I think about the kids, and how many, the fear of children that, things are happening in their neighborhoods. They don't understand it, and they can't do anything about it. But to be able to see their parents doing something about it and not just being afraid is powerful, and it's beautiful. And it's going to, it's going to incubate this whole generation of kids that are saying, it's okay to be afraid, but you have to address it, and you have to do something about it. And that's wonderful, and it's beautiful. And that's what we need for the next 7 generations.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Let's go.
I mean, I've been hearing a lot of people say that, like, it's not a coincidence that the state has chose this location. Is, I don't know, right? This is like the largest deployment of ICE. This is the largest ICE operation in U.S. history. And it's not a coincidence that they've chosen this place. So I've heard a lot of, I think, very good reasons for why this was chosen. But I've heard the term testing ground, that this is like a testing ground for the rest of the country. A lot of comrades here have been reminding us that actually Chicago and New York have experienced very similar levels of ICE deployment and this level of violence and terror being unleashed in those cities. But if the state was like using this as an experiment, like a social experiment, and like, what is the threshold of the people? People have been developing these infrastructures. I just remember Frida Hewson. I referenced her in the last chapter of the Red Deal because I wrote most of that chapter. And I remember Ann Spice, our comrade Ann Spice, did an interview with Frida that was like about Standing Rock. And Frida Hewson used the term critical infrastructure. And she's like, they, meaning like the settler state and the capitalist system, like they have their critical infrastructure. It's pipelines, it's bulldozers, it's dams, right? It's tanks. Like that's their critical infrastructure, but we have our own critical infrastructure. It's the water, this clean drinking water. It's the salmon that come from the river that feed the people. Or it's the salmon that come from the river that feed the bears, that contribute to the berries that we pick to feed our people. She's like, that's our critical infrastructure. And so if this is like some really twisted, like large scale social experiment, that the state is using on the people, what we're seeing here is the confrontation between a people's critical infrastructure of care and the critical infrastructure of settler colonialism, essentially, and capitalism. And I feel like we've seen that in a lot of the front lines. That's what a front line is. A front line is a border between those two things, right? In Red Nation Rising, we talk a lot about border towns. A border town is like where settler order confronts indigenous order. And here that is happening, but it's not just indigenous order. It's like all of the orders of relationality kind of coming together and forming a fist. And so the state is coming up against that. And it's not a clash. I'm doing this right now, but it's not meant to be like a violent clash. It's just how I think we can understand, I think, what's happening. And so just as the state is conducting this like really fucked up experiment on the people, we too are building power. And just to remind people that we too are building our own infrastructures in real time. And yeah, we're not conducting experiments. That's the difference. Ain't no one here conducting experiments. We're just doing the right thing by each other. And by we, I mean the universal we of all of the different people, the good people of the Twin Cities from all walks of life who know what's good and are doing the right thing in this moment. I also wanted to say, not even necessarily from like a leftist talking point perspective, because we hear a lot about working class solidarity, right, within leftist discourse, but I think what we're seeing here is actual true working class solidarity across multiple sectors of the population. And I haven't even wrapped my mind around that either, but I think we might be able to call it that. And that is also like very significant. It's like very significant. So anyway, just my thoughts from just one Navajo in the North. She doesn't even go here, just like doing
Two Navajos in the North.
Two Navajos in the North.
Yeah, I feel like you're just talking about all the people and working class people and people from all walks of life and I mean, coming together. It's not an indigenous thing. It's not a black thing. It's not, it's just being human. Like it's just being a human being. And what do we all call ourselves in whatever language, we come from? We're just the people. And And this is just the people. This is just the people coming together.
Five-fingered beings.
And the five-fingered ones, the Earth's surface people, and taking care of one another is what we're supposed to do. And it's a beautiful thing to hear when it actually happens, and then we can, set aside what separates us, and concentrate on what we are, what we want for our lives, for our families: peace, food, shelter, water, clean water. And I feel like this is giving me hope, and it's hope in a way that I haven't felt in a long time, because it's in the face of such horror. I'm 60 years old, and I don't ever remember being in a place where the settler state didn't follow, at least the very basic of its own fucked up laws. And everything, like, there was a structure. You didn't have to like it, but there was a structure. And like Melanie, you were talking about, I don't pay much attention to the Constitution. I never paid much attention to it either, but I knew I could say something and that I wasn't going to get arrested for it. That was 5 years ago. I knew I could go out there and pull down a statue, and I was not going to, well, I might've gotten arrested, but, we didn't get arrested. And then I knew if I did get arrested that I would get out. And now, all bets are off. And maybe it's that absolute uncertainty that is part of why people are coming together, because there are no rules anymore. And there are no laws except human law, which is you have to eat, you have to have shelter, you have to, raise your family, you have to protect your family. And that's where you strip away everything that the settler state supposedly guaranteed, like our civil rights, and protection. And you strip all that away and realize that was just, lies upon lies upon lies. And the only thing we ultimately have is each other. So yeah, I don't know.
Damn.
I'm glad to hear what's going on.
So it's truly like humble people of the earth moving together.
I am the most humble.
I didn't know it was a contest. But we said this in the Red Deal too. Like when the people move, we move with them, and it's the people who are going to ultimately decide what happens in the world right now. It's not the leaders. When the leaders, the people, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. And we know, and we've known this, as a communist and as a Marxist, as an indigenous communist, like we know that they need us way more than we need them. And this revolution, if it is the precursor to an all-out revolution, was going to happen regardless. And we're watching, end stage capitalism. We're watching end stage imperialism, and we're watching the decline of empire and the decline of this so-called, colonial project that is the United States. And I just can't wait till it crumbles into dust, and, we can dance around and kick it all up and say, we were here always, we're here now, and we will be here forever.
Gives me a lot of hope. I was actually thinking that the past couple of days too.
Hmm. Well, we all got silent and we're recording. Let's try to fill the silence. I'm sorry, were you done or were you just thinking between thoughts?
I was just thinking between thoughts.
Sorry about that. Go for it.
Wait, I mean, I was just thinking.
Oh, now you're thinking?
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, we're just trying to like wrap our minds around stuff happening in real time. And this is not to say that there aren't, it's complexities and complications and differences. Of course there are. It's like millions of people mobilizing for something. So I'm not like romanticizing what's happening here, but nevertheless, I'm trying to get a solid political read, on what's happening. And I think this is part of it. This is a really important part of it. So,
well, and thank you. Thank you for being there, and thank you for witnessing, and thank you for being, because we need truth from the ground, and we need, we need to know what's happening, but it also needs to be recorded in so many ways. Like, this is what happened. And the only truth we're going to get is from the people on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Dang. Yeah. And the thing is that the infrastructure of care, especially with COVID, that was global. So people can do this and should pick that back up in their locations. Keep doing it. I know a lot of people been doing it. Regardless of whether or not ICE invades your community, because this is an invasion, the city is under siege, right? The city is under siege. Regardless, the more we do that and we practice that solidarity and being in good relation with each other, man, that's where the power is.
Yep.
That's what keeps us strong.
Power to the people.
No, I'm just thinking. I'm only here for another day, but just thinking about coming back home. It's just gonna be a lot of organizing with Navajo Nation, and I'm just. It's gonna be a lot. Navajo Nation, once they get on board, once they actually, protect its own people, it'll be a force to reckon with. But man, just thinking about it's man, they got a lot of work to do. We got a lot of work to do.
And maybe that's another takeaway for Native people who are listening to this. Go and organize in your community. Talk to your tribal council. Talk to your representatives. Not congressional representatives. I'm talking about the people who are in political positions within your nation. To express solidarity, to ban ICE from reservations, from tribal lands, to protect not just our people, but all people. This sign behind me says, right, no one is illegal on stolen land. Practice that authority, the inherent sovereignty that we have as Indigenous people and as Indigenous nations. Whether the land is unceded or not, we are the first people of this land. In some cases, even legally, ICE has no legal authority to be operated on unceded treaty land. That land and the jurisdiction of that land and the authority over that land is in dispute. And it's actually not in dispute. It belongs to the Indigenous nations who actually have treaty rights, which are supposed to be the supreme law of the land according to the Constitution. And so in some cases, ICE doesn't even have the legal authority, according to the Constitution, to be operating in the ways that they're operating. Certainly, people are challenging their moral authority, right, to be operating out of these spaces. But, this no one is illegal on stolen land. That means a lot. There's a whole lineage of sovereignty, what sovereignty and treaty rights mean, that that provide the basis and the foundation for saying something like, no, it's not just a catchy slogan, right? No one is illegal on stolen land. There's like a legitimate political and legal claim in that statement that only indigenous nations can make as those who have the first relation with this land and who have actually independent nations. So tribal officials listening, or people listening who have relationships with, or, you know, maybe your family member is on council, you know, go talk to them, you know, talk to them about this. Like, it would be a really powerful assertion of sovereignty to say ICE is not allowed on tribal land, or that no one is illegal on stolen land. It's a really powerful expression and assertion of sovereignty and your treaty rights, not just protecting your own citizens. It's not just about our own people. It's about who resides on the land and who does have the authority to claim that someone belongs and someone doesn't belong. Who has that authority? So, I don't know.
And at a time when treaty rights are being attacked, and when our tribal leaders are afraid because if they stand up to ICE and Krusty Gnome, they'll be, you know, they'll lose federal funding, and they'll, you know, have to face more citizens being kidnapped. Like, stand up and don't bow down to the settler state. You know, don't allow ICE to stay in hotels that are tribally owned, that are offering money to have training centers. No, say no. And you know, tribal leaders aren't going to do it. Then the people need to do it. So, like Mel said, talk to your relatives, talk to your, you know, your fellow tribal members. Raise some hell. Like, ICE should not be allowed on tribal land, no matter how much money they're giving. You know, there are other ways of economic development that don't go against indigenous values, and that don't totally contradict what it is that we stand for as a people and our caretaking traditions. Don't allow that to happen, because it's a betrayal of our rights as Native people to live in community with the land and with all of the living beings. And ICE is a contradiction to that. They shouldn't be allowed on Native land anywhere. And it's all Native land, so there's that. But on sovereign treaty land, they should not be allowed at all. And politically, we should have the right to say that.
And enforce it.
Mm-hmm.
And enforce it.
Yeah, Sina, there's a clip that we're gonna send you later on that you should totally put in the show. But there's one of the Lakota officials that came to Minneapolis. They were like doing like an interview or whatever, and they were just like, ICE. Oh man, I forget the exact quote, but they're just like,
I wrote it down. It's right there.
Oh my God. ICE is not allowed on this res. We're closing our borders. You're not allowed to come terrorize our members on our own homelands. You're not allowed on our fucking reservation, period. I was just like, yo.
That's all I got to say. And then he just walked away.
Yeah, I was just like, you know, how come Lakotas are cool and like Navajos aren't, you know? Like, I just always, the day that we are is the day that we're probably going to, we will win. Like, honestly, like, I feel like our people are like kind of like the just holding everyone else back.
Sleeping giant. Yeah. We're just holding everyone else back. Oh man, but I don't know. That's true. I feel like we got to get to work. We got to organize amongst our own people. Yeah, I don't want to hold the indigenous collective back from liberation, just because we're afraid of losing federal money, or like we have like this really intense conservatism that's political, religious, and social baked into the fabric of Navajo nationalism in like a really disturbing way that's still very powerful, that prevents us from just doing the right thing it's the right thing to stand with the people. We're like, we sell our souls when we don't operate in the spirit of ke, as the net people, which is kinship. So, yeah, aho.
Aho.
Yeah. I'll say you're not allowed on a fucking reservation. Actually, you're not allowed on our treaty land because that covers a much bigger territory space than the rest does. But yeah, or you're just not allowed on native land, which is all land. Which is all land. So stop. Don't bring Avatar into this. Stop. We're done.
We're done. Yeah, the minute you said Avatar, we're done.